Yes, 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 yes. How are you all feeling? Let me know if you can hear me in the chat. Can you guys hear me loud and clear? Let me know if you can hear me. Okay, loud and clear. All right, I want to acknowledge the proprietor of one of my favorite Instagram pages. B-Tech Grime is in the chat. Shout out to B-Tech Grime. Any of you guys follow B-Tech Grime on Instagram? The one and only B-Tech Grime. That page is crazy. Okay, I can be heard loud and clear. That's all good. So, oh, that's right, Peter. Yes, I did appear on camera in that one as well. But other than that one where I was hitting the bag, this is my only appearance that most of you will have seen on camera. So check out the video of myself from back in 2014 or something like that. Check the link in the description and you'll see me spitting some hot bars live in the flesh on camera. Just click the link in the description. Monroe says, you got bars, Hatman. I like the tune. Big up, big up, big up. And make sure you guys follow that Rumble channel. It's called The Bottomless Drink. There'll be lots of my old tracks getting uploaded there. I've literally got hundreds of tracks that I recorded over the years. I don't have them all myself. I got some of them, but friends, because I used to record at friends' home studios and what have you, and they got a lot of my tracks. So yeah, they'll be getting uploaded to that Rumble channel, The Bottomless Drink. Check the latest one. It's one of people's favorite tracks of mine. So check the link in the description below. I'll post it again here in the live chat. For people who are curious about what I look like, some people think I must be some, you know, tiny little guy or something. No, star. Shout out to G-Man in the chat. Well, most of my music people have never heard, at least my YouTube audience have never heard most of my music. Even my Patreon audience have never heard most of it. They've probably heard about 5% of it, if that. There's so much more. Again, check out that track and you'll get a taste of what is to come on there. Shout out to Declan Ball. Well, I did a B-Tech myself in college. Shout out to Benjamin. Says you can rap still, should have gained traction. Shame about the mask. Nah, star, I was ahead of my time. Now most of these or not most of them, but a lot of these young rappers wear masks now. There was me wearing a mask. I know MF Doom used to wear a mask and all that. He was the real pioneer, although Ghostface Killer was wearing a mask long before MF Doom. But anyway, yeah, I was wearing that mask back in 2013, 2014. And now all the young drill rappers wear masks today, don't they? Or a lot of them. Somebody's saying the audio's a bit muffled. Am I being trolled or is the audio okay? Other people said loud and clear. I'm looking at all my settings here and I don't see why it would be muffled. Yeah, somebody says audio's fine. All right. Probably getting trolled again. Let's switch up the visuals here. How about the boxing venues? I haven't spoken to you guys about this stock footage before. I'm sure most of you will have realized, but if you're not from London, you might not have. It is footage of some of the most famous boxing venues in London. The first one is York Hall, Bethnal Green. This one here is the Copper Box Arena. Later on in the footage, you see Wembley Stadium. You also see Wembley Arena. I forget what they call Wembley Arena now. You know, it's always named after, is it a sponsor or, you know, some major corporation or company usually names the venue after themselves these days. But yeah, some of the most famous boxing venues in London. All right, how many of you guys, oh, it's called the Ovo now. Okay. So how many of you guys saw the boxing this weekend? We had Dtan Smith. He took on a guy called Weezer from France for the European 140-pound title. That fight didn't go around. We can talk about that. And also Diego Pacheco, as you'll see from the thumbnail. He had a win over the weekend in a relatively dull fight, I thought. Other than the final 2 or 3 rounds, it was pretty dull. So I want to get your take on that fight. Tom S says, did you see the video of Rick Ross sneaking away behind the gate and leaving his man to get jumped? I didn't, but I'm not really surprised because have you seen Rick Ross on the pads? Rick Ross can't fight to save his life. So I'm not surprised he left his man to get jumped. Rick Ross on the pads is almost as pathetic as Snoop Dogg on the pads. You ever seen Snoop Dogg hit pads? That's crazy as well. In fact, Rick Ross might be worse than Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg is terrible, but yeah, Rick Ross has got no hands at all. Like somebody said there in the chat. None. It's amazing, isn't it, how some of the most boastful people in the world of entertainment literally couldn't fight to save their lives, or can't fight to save their lives. Isn't that incredible? He would probably say he don't need to fight because he's got them blickies, you know, he's got them straps, but why is he hitting pads then if he feels like he don't need to fight? Joe Williams says can't be as bad as Stephen A. Smith. You might be right there, to be fair. I forgot about Stephen A. Smith. His pad work was crazy. Yo, Stephen A. You got me cracking up just thinking about that pad work. That was a madness. Oh my gosh. Andrew says Adam Smith is worse. Surely Adam Smith has never committed pad work to film, to camera. Surely he's never inflicted that upon himself and upon the British public. Adam Smith has never done pads on camera, surely. Yeah, but I want to shout out Joe Williams because, yeah, you've trumped the people that I mentioned with Stephen A. Smith. You've trumped all the ones I mentioned. Stephen A. Smith is the worst pad work I've ever seen, I think, in my life. And I've been around a long time. I've seen all kind of different people in gyms, you know, people on their first day in a boxing gym doing pads. Men, women, children. And Stephen A. Smith, as far as I can recall, is the worst person I've ever seen on the pads. Absolutely, it's incredible, actually. Never mind shocking. It's actually incredible how bad he is on the pads. It's like he went out of his way to try and be, I don't think he did, but if he didn't know any better, you'd think he went out of his way to be terrible. Andrew says the pads had him looking crazy. Shout out to Charles B. He says, have you seen Keir Starmer on the bag? I haven't, but I'd like to treat Keir Starmer like a punching bag, I tell you that. Oh, Keir Starlin. Same says, can't be worse than Ronda Rousey shadow boxing. Well, have you seen the video in question? Because you might change your mind. Stephen A. Smith. If there's such a thing as having two left hands instead of two left feet, it's what Stephen A. Smith has got. So I mentioned two of the fights that happened this weekend and nobody that I can see has commented on them. So I guess no one's interested. There isn't much to talk about, to be fair. Wow, somebody's saying that Starmer is worse than Stephen A. Smith on the pads. That is quite an achievement. An inverse achievement, you know, like an achievement in the negative. To be worse on the pads than Stephen A. Smith is quite a feat. Oh, on the bag though, not the pads. Okay. Because Stephen A. Smith was throwing punches on the pads that I didn't even know existed. Like, he's literally making up punches that have never before been used in boxing. The only time I've seen punches like that are like in fighting video games like Street Fighter. You know, Street Fighter 2 has got some weird punches. Yeah. Stephen A. Smith was throwing weird punches like from Street Fighter 2. Trailblazer. Yep, that's right, Charles B. He's innovating. He's an innovator. Somebody's asking or wondering how Diddy would be on the pads. I don't know, but apparently he could fight. But when people say that somebody can fight, as in they can have a go in the street, that's not the same as being able to actually box, obviously. There are some people who apparently can fight against drunks in the street, but you put them in a gym and get them hitting a bag or pads and they look comical. One person though, who suffered a fate which presumably Diddy will also suffer, that according to many actually can not only fight but box, is R. Kelly. You heard about that? R. Kelly can actually, according to Fat Joe and many other people, he can actually box. Like, they've witnessed this guy get in the ring and actually box people. Make of that what you will. Yeah, 50 Cent used to box, yeah. I think he was in the Golden Gloves, actually. So yeah, 50 Cent did used to box, although he doesn't look great on the pads. He looks still a little novice-y, but he's better than most. Aiden says, I think Bugsy Malone is a good boxer. I think Bugsy Malone can't fight to save his life. We actually talked about this a few streams back. I don't think Bugsy Malone is a good boxer at all. But then again, it depends on what standard you're judging him by. If you're judging him by the standard of rappers, then yeah, maybe he's better than most rappers at boxing. If you're judging him by even like a novice amateur standard, the boy can't fight. Aiden says, all right, I hear he had lots of amateur fights. I don't think he had lots. He had a few. And it didn't, you know, there's a reason that he chose rap as a career rather than pursuing professional boxing. You know, continuing to box as an amateur and what have you. Jimbo Jones says, none of these UK rappers can fight. Swarms, Mist, Big Tobs, all terrible. Yep. The best fighter I've seen out of the Misfits guys, or one of them anyway, is what's his name now? KSI is actually okay for a YouTuber, and obviously Jake Paul. KSI is okay. KSI could beat Bugsy Malone. KSI probably knock him out. Also, but the one who is actually not bad is Salt Papy. You guys seen Salt Papy? He's actually not bad, you know, for a YouTuber. He's all right. Yeah, Charles B. He beat me to it. Yeah, Salt Papy. He's actually pretty decent. He's nice and relaxed, and he throws that solid left hand, and he's got something about him. Like, he does have some boxing talent there, Salt Papy. Somebody's saying that Salt Papy got KO'd last fight. Did he? I swear Salt Papy won his last fight against some other YouTuber, a black guy from London, I think. So has he fought more recently than that? Wow, who stopped him? Everyone's saying no, Salt won his last fight. Other people are saying he got chinned. He got chinned by Slim? I thought Slim fought the other big nose guy. Surprised by that, because in terms of offense, Salt Papy, Slim stopped Slim. Anderson Gibb, that's the one. Yeah, I thought that Slim fought Anderson. How often are these guys fighting? It's like amateur boxing, they're fighting all the time. Wow, Salt Papy got knocked out by Slim. Well, maybe Slim is better than I thought. Okay, people are saying he lost a lot of weight and then he lost. So he's one of those guys who's better fat, is he? Okay, G-Man saying he punched himself out. Okay, got a super chat here. Shout out to Andrew for the super chat. No comment, just a boxing glove, so much appreciated. Thank you very much, sir. Mike Oxlong says Salty Ruiz. Yeah, Wings of Redemption against the other guy was a madness. Definitely one of the most bizarre things maybe the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in a boxing ring was Wings of Redemption fighting that other morbidly obese gentleman whose name I forget. I've never seen him before. I guess he's a gamer. Well, he must be a gamer. There's nothing else he could do. Anthony Hayweather says, Savage Dan, the guy who works for Boxer, can fight. Does he have a boxing background? Boogie. Yeah, that was the guy's name, Boogie. Somebody's saying he's RIP. Well, RIP if he is RIP, but not really surprising, is it, when you get to that size? It's a ticking time bomb. Shout out to FIFA for the super chat. He says, much love, Hatman. Just watched Ibeabuchi versus Tua. Any recommendations for hidden gem fights to watch? Well, on my live streaming channel, I'm not sure if you're subscribed over there, but on my live streaming channel called Hatman Boxing Live, I've got a playlist on there of hidden gem fights. So head on over there to Hatman Boxing Live, go to the playlist section, and you'll see a bunch of you'll see a playlist there with a bunch of hidden gem fights on it. Assuming you haven't done that already. So shout out to JR for the super chat. Also shout out to Mohammad for the super chat. He says, Hatman, have you ever considered training fighters? I've trained fighters, or I've assisted in training a few fighters over the years. One pro and a few amateurs. But I've never really wanted to take it seriously because I can't commit. I can't make that kind of commitment. You know, because I'm always moving about. I don't really like being on somebody else's schedule. I like to be on my own schedule. So I don't really have the personality type necessary, at least not at this stage of my life, to be training someone. It's a full-time job training somebody, you know? Anthony Hayworth says, Savage Dan was an amateur at Dale Youth. Okay. Maybe he can box. I've never seen him, but there are obviously a lot of people out there who can box, who've got boxing backgrounds, who are no longer involved in actually fighting, and you wouldn't know. You know, maybe they had an amateur career or whatever. There are plenty of bricklayers, painters and decorators, plumbers, electricians who had 30, 40, 50, 60 amateur bouts. Do you know what I mean? Plenty of people like that out there who might have dad bods, but if it goes off, they're taking everyone's jaw clean off. So never judge a book by its cover. There's certain dad bod men out there who are lethal still, even though they're like 45, you know, with a missus and kids, and they lay bricks for a living. I mean, who was that guy that knocked out David Haye in the amateurs? Jim Twite. I think he was a Tyler, wasn't he? So he was a Tyler. Maybe he still is. Shout out to Brad for the super chat. He says, who do you think handled their definitive loss better? AJ versus Usyk 2, Wilder versus Fury 2, or Usyk versus Fury 2? It's got to be AJ versus Usyk, because other than the tantrum that AJ threw in the ring, which was very silly and distasteful, obviously, once he got that out of his system on the night, he was okay. He gave Usyk his praise. He wasn't coming out with a load of excuses. So in terms of, I guess it depends on what you mean. As far as being a good loser, AJ. But in terms of who was more psychologically damaged by their loss, it's got to be Deontay Wilder. He was the most psychologically damaged. And who was the least psychologically damaged? We don't know how Fury's been affected by the 2 losses to Usyk yet. But given the fact that, you know, they weren't, I mean, he did take a lot of punishment in the first fight, to be fair. So, I don't know. Time will tell. Time will tell. But I would say that, you know, the Usyk fights affected AJ psychologically because at that point he realized that there's no chance of him being the best. But again, he didn't get knocked out. Knockout defeats and the knockdowns that AJ suffered, I think, hurt him psychologically more than anything else, more than the points defeats to Usyk. But shout out to Brad for the super chat. Also shout out to Beast LFC for his super chat. He says, the video you shared of yourself on the bag is crazy. How do you develop that power and work rate aside from sprints? Well, most of the physicality of anyone is genetic. So, you know, if I trained from when I was a kid to be the best 100-meter sprinter in the world and break Usain Bolt's record, I'm older than Usain Bolt, but you know, in a hypothetical scenario, I would never beat his record, okay? Because physically, the way he has been made, the way his genetics have made him come out, are conducive to him being the fastest man ever recorded to have run 100 meters. So it doesn't matter how dedicated I would have been, or any of us would have been to being the best 100-meter runner in history, we never would have beaten the guy. Okay, so a lot of physicality, not just for sprinting, but for boxing, is just genetic. Now, obviously, as good as your genetics may be, you have to work on things to improve and emphasize the things that you're good at. As far as that video of me on the bag, again, I was always naturally athletic, but I watched people like Mike Tyson, Roy Jones, and explosive fighters. And again, I was always a sprinter. I was always someone, I'm too big, obviously, to have ever been like a world-class sprinter or anything. You know, certainly once I reached my 20s, I was far too heavy to be a sprinter. But yeah, I was always athletic and what have you for my size. And I looked at explosive fighters and I did sprint training and all that kind of stuff and trained the way that I wanted to fight. If you go to the gym and you're throwing 100 punches around, then you're not going to be able to come out with fast explosive bursts in the way that, you know, a Roy Jones, a Mike Tyson, somebody like that would. If you've ever seen Mike Tyson hitting the bag, he doesn't stand in front of the bag throwing 1,000,000 punches. That's not the way he trains, because that's not the way he fights. He fights in bursts, in fast, powerful, explosive bursts. The same with Roy Jones and most fighters like that. They might have the odd session here or there where they're just going for volume because it's a fitness thing. But most bag sessions, they're not throwing 1,000,000 punches on the bag. They're going for fast, explosive bursts, power, speed, and quality over quantity. So if you train like that consistently, it will improve. Regardless of your genetics, it will improve your power and speed if you train for power and speed. If you train for that rather than what most boxing coaches try and get you to do when you step in a boxing gym, which is volume over everything, which is something I'm really not a fan of. But shout out to Beast LFC for the super chat. Mike Oxlong says, train them over Zoom, collect the paycheck easy. There's probably people who do that. Shout out to Paul McAllister for the super chat. He says, biggest overachiever in boxing you've seen? That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I would say that Dennis Andrews was an overachiever. If any of you are familiar with Dennis Andrews, he was a strong guy, but horrible coordination, slow, not really a particularly great puncher. He had okay power, but Dennis Andrews was just one of these guys that was incredibly mentally tough. He wasn't even an iron-jawed fighter, right? But he was just physically strong, very mentally tough, and doggedly determined. So he was light heavyweight champion. He had a rivalry with an Australian fighter whose name escapes me at the moment. Can't remember the guy's name now. White Australian guy. He had a rivalry with him and he had some good fights. But when Andrews was light heavyweight champion, he was challenged by Tommy Hearns. Tommy Hearns beat Dennis Andrews all over the ring in the most brutal fashion. There was one round where I think Andrews was down 3 or 4 times. He got an absolute shellacking from Tommy Hearns. Humiliating, right? I mean, it was one of them ones where he was getting hit with massive shots, falling down, and he was grabbing hold of Tommy Hearns' legs. You know, when someone's that out of it? In this day and age, they would stop a fight like that. But back then, it was more brutal. And Dennis Andrews took a terrible shellacking and was totally humiliated. Remember, this is a Tommy Hearns moving up through the weight classes. Andrews was supposed to be the natural light heavyweight, and he got, terrible beatdown. But after that fight, Dennis Andrews went to the Kronk gym because obviously Tommy Hearns was a Kronk fighter. Dennis Andrews went out to America, went to the Kronk gym, right to the exact place where Tommy Hearns trains. And he said, I want to spar Tommy Hearns. So that's the mentality of Dennis Andrews. As limited as he was, he wasn't the most particularly naturally gifted at all. But he was such a tough guy. And when someone gave him a beatdown, he was like, okay, let me jump back in the ring with a guy who just gave me a terrible beatdown. Let me go train where he trains. Let me spar him all the time. That was his mentality. So I would say he was an overachiever. There have been many others over the years. Some people might say Saki Obika, Murky Sosa. Murky Sosa actually used to remind me of Saki Obika. I mean, Murky Sosa was, an older fighter from a previous generation, but he and Saki Obika had a very similar style, like an octopus with poor coordination or whatever. Some people might even say Dylan White, although the guys I'm talking about, actually, was Murky Sosa ever a world champion? I can't remember now. I think he was. Saki Obika was. And Dennis Andrews was. Dylan White wasn't. So I'm not sure whether Dylan White would be as much of an overachiever as those guys because he didn't ever become a world champion. Another one would be Sam Solomon. You guys remember Sam Solomon from Australia? I would say he was an overachiever as well. All of these guys very similar in that they were not very talented at all. You ever seen Sam Solomon box? It's quite an experience, right? Talk about ugly style. But he was just such a tough guy like the others. He was determined to make it happen, even without the talent. A shout out to Mohammad, Brad for their super chats. Shout out to Beast LFC. Shout out to Paul McAllister. Just check if I've read all the super chats so far. Don't want to miss anybody. Yep, got everyone so far. Well, shout out to all you guys. Andrew says Wilder is an overachiever. You could say that, but despite Wilder's technical shortcomings, he was definitely a tremendous puncher. And the guys I mentioned, like Sam Solomon, Dennis Andrews, Murky Sosa, those guys are not tremendous punchers. But Wilder with the right hand was a terrific puncher. One of the best right hand punchers I've ever seen in the heavyweight division, Deontay Wilder. Tremendous puncher. Thank you, Jeff Harding. That's the guy. Thank you. Striker 2479. A very tough guy, Jeff Harding. Very, very tough guy. Bexy says, Hatman, why does Johnny Fisher's dad insist on eating his way into an early grave? Guy's blood sugar levels must be off the chart. Yeah, I don't know what that's all about. It's very weird. Very weird. What's more weird is the people cheering him on. What's their agenda, you know? What is the world coming to? Any of you guys remember the movie The Running Man, the original? I'm not sure if that was based on a Philip K. Dick novel, The Running Man. I think it might have been. But The Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's basically a movie about a dystopian future where the most popular game show in America or in the world is this show where it's basically like a modern day version of the Gladiators or a futuristic version of the Roman Colosseum, where you've got these contestants who are usually people that have been arrested for various crimes, and they get sent into this arena, and they have to go up against these gladiator type people who are armed with weapons, and they try to, delete them, end their lives. And so the conversation always was, well, will humanity ever reach a point where those kind of shows become reality? Obviously, those things happened, centuries ago, millennia ago in ancient Rome and what have you, but will we ever reach a point where it happens again in some dystopian future? And so, yeah, where I was going with that, hang on. Okay, somebody saying Running Man was based on a Stephen King novel. Okay. Well, Stephen King who wrote it, not Philip K. Dick. Philip K. Dick was so prolific. You know, there's so many sci-fi films based on his books. But yeah, is the you know, the situation with Johnny Fisher's dad like halfway to society watching Running Man type game shows in real life? Because they're watching Johnny Fisher's dad eat himself into an early grave in real time and they're cheering him on. Isn't that weird? But then again, maybe boxing is halfway to that, right? Although boxing is responsible for less, far less fatalities than morbid obesity. Overeating kills far more people than boxing. That has to be said. And Mohammad says, Hatman, do you watch Squid Game? Yeah, I've seen season 1 and 2. I thought season 1 was a lot better. I thought season 2 was meh. And I didn't like the cliffhanger for season 3. S.A says his blood type is soy sauce. That's crazy. You know what? I think soy sauce is too thin to be Johnny Fisher's dad's blood. I think his blood is more like sweet and sour sauce. You got sweet and sour sauce for blood, I'm telling you. It's that thick and gelatinous. Bexy says, thoughts on the movie Demolition Man? That film portrays a fully woke society, not free to think society. Well, it's like life is imitating art, isn't it? I remember that film. It had Wesley Snipes and Sandra Bullock in it, right? Murder, death, kill, and all that stuff. Yeah, I remember that. Somebody says more like lard. Custard. Yeah, I agree, Beast LFC. Encircled says the Fisher family really make me cringe. You know, as much as I've been saying from day one that to me, Johnny Fisher is just a gimmick fighter, a little Essex ticket seller, I absolutely admire and respect his ambition. Johnny Fisher is giving it a go. And if he wasn't doing this, he'd probably be okay. He'd probably be, you know, he comes from a decent kind of family where his dad obviously earned money doing whatever he's done. And he went to university, so he'd probably have an okay job and be doing all right in his life. But he's most likely doing better given the fact he's had a go at boxing than he would have done without it, right? So I admire what Johnny Fisher is trying to do. I just don't think he's that good. Boxing is a brutal sport. Everybody can't be world class. Some people have to be domestic level, area level. Declan McKenna says, Johnny is all right. It's his dad that's the unbearable one. I agree. Johnny is all right. I've got nothing against Johnny Fisher at all. Yeah, I saw Johnny Fisher's dad in real life in Harold Wood. I think that's where they live. There's a boxing shop down there. In Harold Wood called Box Fit. Boxing shop, and they've got, you know, it's quite a big shop now. They redid it a few years ago. So, yeah, I saw Johnny Fisher's dad in there. And this guy was just yapping and yapping and yapping and yapping to the staff in there about his son and bigging himself up and yapping about his son. And I mean, I was like, wow, he's like this in real life? And the look on the staff's face, you could see that the guys behind the counter were just like, oh my God, not this guy again. Mohammad says living through his son. Yep, vicariously. As many dads with successful sons do. It's not an uncommon thing for dads to live vicariously through successful offspring. Somebody says John Scary. I guess he meant John Fury still in hiding. Well, he came out of hiding briefly, didn't he, for the press conference between Tommy Fury and what's the Scouts guy who just fought from UFC? I've forgotten his name already. Dan D says, can you tell us about your street fight with Dean White? Well, I could tell you about it if I ever had a street fight with Dean White, but I've never had a street fight with him. I definitely can't tell you about it because it never happened. Darren Till, thank you. Yeah, the press conference for Tommy Fury, Darren Till. John was there, wasn't he? That's the first time he made a public appearance after Tyson's first loss to Usyk. Jackie Boy Johnson says Johnny Fisher got owned by Gad. Probably the only person Gad has ever owned. John Partridge, quiet as a church mouse. Not just a mouse, but church mouse. Joshua Hooker says, no offense, Hatman, but Dean White would kill you. Okay. It's quite a statement since you've never seen me fight. Okay. Believe whatever makes you happy and what allows you to sleep at night. Khalid says, I saw Dean in real life. The guy must be 6'7". Yeah, he's a very big man. Very big. And he apparently has some kind of like wrestling or jiu-jitsu background. I think that's how he and Dylan met. They're not actually brothers. They met when Dylan was doing some type of martial arts, kickboxing or something like that. And that's how they became acquainted. So, somebody says Dean's real name is Dean Partridge. It's definitely not Dean Partridge. And shout out to Baby Ting. He's not in, the interviews and what have you as much these days because of the tragedy that happened to his son a couple years back. It's a terrible shame. And that's obviously hit him hard, what happened to his son. It's hit him very hard, as it would any parent. So shout out to Baby Ting. Mike Oxlong says Dean White explaining him restraining the guy on the plane. That was jokes. Yeah, that was jokes. Where he said, not on my watch, buddy. Not on my watch, buddy. Well, somebody says, did you hear Ebony Bridges is preggers and still doing OnlyFans? Yeah, people keep mentioning that. In the last few live streams, people have been saying that Kel Brook got Ebony Bridges pregnant. I got no idea whether that's true. Pro Cala says, has anyone ever recognized you in public after speaking to you from your voice? Only, not that, but friends have recognized my voice. Friends who didn't even know that I had a YouTube channel randomly came across one of my videos and then called me up like, yo, I never knew you did YouTube. Yeah, that's happened a few times. Shout out to President Brush. He says, has a boxer ever put it on you over content? No. No, they haven't. The only one who, there's been a few, one or two fighters who turned up in the comments of videos, but they didn't really put it on me. It just, like for example, Jarrell Miller back in the days made a comment on a video where I was saying that he and Andy Ruiz should fight. This was years ago, 7, 8, 9 years ago, something like that, long time ago, long before they actually did fight. And I was saying in the video, I'd like to see the two fat boys square off. I think it'd be good. And Jarrell Miller turned up in the comments and was like, huh, you funny, talking about the two fat boys. You got jokes, huh? And he said a few things here and there, but it wasn't, he was a good sport. But I certainly wouldn't want to, get on the wrong side of Jarrell Miller in person. Because obviously he's a pro boxer, he can fight, but he also has a martial arts background. He did kickboxing, I think professionally or semi-pro. So yeah, you wouldn't want to get into a scuffle with him. Phil says, Hatman, what's the most anticipated fight you've seen which stylistically turned out to be a complete snooze fest? I'd have to really think about that one because I can't think of many off the top of my head, you know. Can't think of many. I mean, maybe I was hoping Lennox Lewis, David Tua would be more explosive and it was a snooze fest, but in retrospect, I should have expected it. I don't know. I never expected, for example, Mayweather Pacquiao to be anything but a snooze fest. Somebody says, didn't Dylan White call me out? He didn't call me out. Why would he call me out, you know? He's a pro fighter. He just basically, he half shouted me out and half dissed me at the same time. It wasn't really a diss. He just said that Hatman's a funny one because sometimes he praises you and other times he criticizes you. So that's Dylan White not understanding the objective of my channel is not to be a fanboy for a fighter, but it's to be objective, right? So that's all he said. It wasn't any kind of like call out or harsh diss. He actually bigged me up in that interview. But he said, yeah, he's a bit of a funny one, but... And then he bigged me up. And he messaged me after that as well on Twitter, when I was still on Twitter. Shout out to the box for the super chat. He says, who wins if Wilder and Povetkin had fought in 2016? Great question. At the time, I was thinking Wilder. And maybe I still do think Wilder, but it's a very tough fight. I might even say it's just stylistically, maybe. Do I see it as a 50-50? You know what? No, I'm going to say Povetkin. I'm going to say Povetkin beats Wilder. A prime Povetkin, 2016. I'm going to say he beats Wilder. Might have to come through some hairy moments, but I reckon he would maybe beat him. If not on points, then stop him late. So I'll go Povetkin. Because, and the reason I changed my mind on the spot like that is because I think back to the Klitschko fight, the number of massive right hands and left hooks and all that leaning on that Povetkin had to endure in that fight, and he still went the distance. And I'm thinking, if he can take all that back then I reckon he can take what Wilder's got to dish out. Even if he gets hurt or dropped, I reckon he can come through. So I'll go Povetkin. A workstation says, Hatman, what is your opinion on Dtan Smith? Him and Hearn trashed Azim for not fighting him. Disappeared for almost a year, then came back against Wheezy or whatever his name was last night. Yeah, I was speaking about this earlier on in the stream, and Dtan Smith suffered because of the fact that the Azim fight didn't happen. Because if that fight had happened at the time, Dtan Smith had good momentum and what have you. Azim seems to have a much bigger following. So Dtan Smith is trying to, I wouldn't say operate in Azim's shadow, but something close to that. So yeah, I mean, he needs to kick on and just forget about Adam Azim and try and secure, if not a world title shot, then fight a former world champion. They're talking about maybe him fighting Liam Parrow. I think that's a good fight for him. He performed well for the European title, but he's obviously way beyond this level now. So he has to kick on to world level. He's in his late 20s. So it's time now. It's time for him to step up to the top. Leo says, where we at? Povetkin versus Ortiz, Povetkin all day. Povetkin was like the best super heavyweight amateur in the world for years. Years and years and years. He was like the #1 guy in the amateurs at super heavyweight. He was beating everybody. Ortiz couldn't even get, I mean, Ortiz fought mostly at heavyweight rather than super heavyweight, but he wasn't even the best heavyweight amateur in the world. And he fought briefly at super heavyweight towards the back end of his amateur career. And I know amateur boxing and pro boxing are very different. But generally, guys who are top amateurs, usually, not always of course, but usually go on to be top pros, as Povetkin did. And yeah, I think he would have beaten Luis Ortiz. Povetkin fought loads of Cubans and what have you. So, I reckon Povetkin would beat Ortiz. He did fight a Cuban as a pro. He might have fought several Cubans as a pro, but one Cuban he fought as a pro was Mike Perez. You guys remember that? He knocked Perez out in one round. I think, was Perez still unbeaten going into that fight? I think he might have been unbeaten, right? And Povetkin done him in a round. Jackie Boy Johnson says, Povetkin like Jalalov now then. Pretty much, yeah. He was the dominant super heavyweight for years. Okay, somebody's saying Perez had lost the decision to Jennings. I totally forgot about that. Have I even seen that fight? I'm not sure I ever saw Perez fight Jennings. So you're saying he lost to Jennings prior to fighting Povetkin. I don't remember that. In fact, let me look up Mike Perez's box rec on the fly here. Let me look it up and see when that Povetkin fight actually happened. Let's see here. Yes, that is correct. So, no, he didn't actually lose to Takam. He had a draw with Carlos Takam. So he drew with Carlos Takam in 2014. I don't think I ever saw that fight either. I saw the fight prior to the Takam fight, which was against Magomed Abdusalamov. That was a very good fight, by the way, but ended in tragedy for Abdusalamov. Very, very sad what happened to him. And did that have something to do with Perez's demise? Maybe. Some guys are very badly affected when they do that to somebody. And I remember after the Povetkin fight, I can't remember how long after the fight it was, but Mike Perez claimed that he drank a whole bottle of rum backstage before he went out and fought Povetkin. I mean, make of that what you will. Is it just BS because of the fact he got chinned around, or was he dealing with demons because of what happened to Abdusalamov a couple fights earlier? So yeah, he drew with Takam, then he lost to Bryant Jennings. So whoever said that, you were correct. He lost to Jennings on a split decision. Then he came back with a win over a guy called Darnell Wilson. And then he fought Povetkin, and that's when he got chinned around. Yeah, but he claimed he drank a whole bottle of rum before that fight. Oh, excuse me. In Circle says he drew with Takam. I thought you said he lost to Takam. Yeah, he drew with Takam. You're correct. For Lattergate says, not sold on Jalalov, looks like a major KO waiting to happen. Okay. Fair enough. It's all just potential at the moment, isn't it? Until he gets in the ring and proves it, then we'll never know. For Lattergate says Perez was never the same after the incident. Maybe. Maybe. It does affect certain fighters when they do that to somebody. It certainly affected Chris Eubank Sr. when he seriously injured Michael Watson. He was scared to let his hands go after that fight. He just wanted to get through fights without hurting anyone and without getting hurt himself after that second Watson fight, you know? But other fighters, it doesn't bother them at all. Sergey Kovalev, for example. He ended a guy's life in a fight in Russia. I think the fight was in Russia. And it never affected him at all. In fact, when Kovalev went back to Russia to fight Isaac Chilemba, there was members of the guy's family who he killed that turned up to like protest this fight, and they were saying that Kovalev's not a good guy and he didn't do anything to help the family of the, you know, the boxer who he ended and all this type of stuff. And the family turned up and they were very unhappy with Kovalev. But yeah, Kovalev's killer instinct wasn't at all hampered or hindered by what he did to that guy. And of course, in boxing, for the purposes of boxing, that's not a bad thing. But then, you know. Yeah, Kovalev was great to watch. When Kovalev was on his run, he was a beast. He was a scary guy during that unbeaten run. He mashed up Jean Pascal, who was far too brave for his own good. And the story of Kovalev, you know, he got in some trouble with some female who says they assaulted him. I think it was in the Poconos or something, or Big Bear, right? There was some female who said they assaulted him. If you ever read the account of what the female said, I mean, depending on what your sense of humor is like, I had to laugh because she said that the morning after the incident, she came out of her home and Kovalev appeared from out of a bush. Like he'd been hiding in this bush all night from the police. And he climbed, he jumped out of the bush. And I guess he was trying to tell her to like call the police off or something. You know how cold it is up there? In the freezing snow, and Kovalev's been hiding out in a bush all night. That guy's crazy. Oh my days. The bear like a wolf. He came diving out of the bush like some wolf. Stinking of vodka, you know. Yeah, Colin says he's warm from all the vodka in his system. That's right. Yeah, Kovalev was a wrong one, wasn't he? But the back end of his career has been very tough for him, hasn't it? He's been getting knocked out left, right, and center. His last fight, was that on a Riyadh season card where he got chinned last time out? Forget who chinned him. A Wave says, didn't Nigel Benn not regret hurting McClellan until years later he was moving like a bad man after the fight? I don't know whether he regretted it or any of that stuff. What I can tell you is Nigel was never the same fighter after that fight. That fight was so brutal, obviously for McClellan, but even for Nigel Benn, he was never the same after that. He didn't have any fight left in him after the McClellan fight. It was all gone. And you saw that when he had the rematch with Talani Malinga, Sugar Boy Malinga, because Ben had fought him earlier on in his career. The rematch with Malinga was after the McClellan fight, and Ben just had nothing, just absolutely nothing in the tank, and Malinga swole up his face, bust up his eye, and beat him. That McClellan fight finished, you know, McClellan's career, obviously, but it also kind of finished Nigel Benn's career. He was a shell of himself after that. A Pro Cala says, do you think Junior hurting Blackwell affected him? Not at all. And Junior was very honest about it. He said, this is not going to affect me. In fact, it's only going to make me more ferocious because now I'm aware of what can happen to me. So that's going to make me fight even harder to ensure that it doesn't happen to me. He said words to that effect, Junior. M says Alida Alvarez KO Kovalev bad. He did indeed. So did Canelo Alvarez. Jackie Boy Johnson says, should Ben have lost when he went down? Did he beat the count? I think he just about beat the count. Some people were arguing he should have got whatever it is. Is it 30 seconds or a minute? Because he was out of the ring. But that's only if you're off the ring apron. Because he landed on the ring apron outside the ring. He wasn't literally off the apron. You get more time if you get knocked completely out the ring. But I think he just about, you know, beat the count. Pro Cala says, does Junior show signs of psychopathy? He seems to be quite a cold individual. I'm not going to call him a psychopath, but he seems to be quite a cold individual. And interestingly, his dad is very narcissistic. And according to his dad, his mother is very cold, Karen. He says that, you know, the mother of Junior is a cold, like an emotionless person, because he compared the mother to the son, because Chris Sr. is quite emotional. Even though he's narcissistic and all that and eccentric, he's an emotional, kind of sensitive character. Whereas Chris Jr. is cold, and Sr. said the mom is also like that. They have this like emotionless, cold personality. FIFA says, anyone know what happened to Oscar Rivas? I think he retired, didn't he? With eye trouble. Declan says, Junior is a narcissist in my opinion. Well, narcissism is a spectrum, you know, so there are degrees of narcissism. It isn't like, you know, psychopathy where if you pass higher, if you get high enough on the hair test, on the psychopathy checklist, you can be called a psychopath. With narcissism, it's a much more gray type of area, right? And according to Freud, his interpretation of narcissism is that there are healthy levels of narcissism, and then there are malignant levels. So it's a spectrum. Gate says people were pushing Ben back into the ring. That's a DQ. Yeah, people have claimed that, but you can't disqualify because it was journalists and did they really push him back into the ring? They were putting their arms out to stop him falling on them. I don't think you could really get much leverage from their position to be pushing, 100 and whatever he would have been on the night, 75-pound man, 180-pound man back into the ring from their position. So I'm not sure I really buy that, but they certainly put their hands out to stop him falling on them, so he wouldn't fall back as he was trying to get back in the ring. So I've never been too convinced by that idea. If it had been Nigel Benn's corner people doing that, then maybe you could say that's a disqualification. But whereby it was the media, Ocean Blue says, I've been listening to the audio version of Without Conscience. Very interesting so far. Yeah, it's a very interesting book. For those interested in studying psychopaths, all right, if you want to get into psychopathy, then that's always the place I tell people to start, is by reading that book, Without Conscience by Dr. Robert Hare. He's the guy that came up with the diagnostic test, what is now called the Hare test, for how you test for psychopaths. Okay, Robert O'Donoghue says, Ben may have been on PEDs. He collapsed after the fight to avoid the post-fight drug test. That is the narrative, but who knows whether that's true, because Nigel Benn was in a terrible state after the fight. His jaw was swollen, damn near to the size of a melon. Okay, he would have had a horrendous concussion. He was beaten from pillar to post in that fight. He was urinating blood for something like 2 weeks afterwards. So he was in a terrible state. Collapse, and he would have been very dehydrated as well. Once the adrenaline wears off, a fighter in that condition can definitely collapse, right? So could it have been a fake thing to avoid a test? Maybe, but it could just as easily have been genuine, because again, he took a terrible pasting in that fight, despite the fact he won. Pro Cala says, wasn't Holyfield found buying steroids in a pharmacy? No, he wasn't. What happened was a package containing steroids was delivered to one of Holyfield's neighbors, and the name on the package was Mr. Evan Fields. So the idea is that Holyfield didn't want to get the package delivered under his name to his residence in case, media or whatever, journalists hiding in the bushes somehow intercepted it, and whatever the case may be. Especially in America, you had some real crazy journalists who would literally do anything to get a story, especially back then. So the idea is that Holyfield had the package sent to a neighbor under a name that was similar enough to his own, such that the neighbor would say, oh, this must be for Evander across the way. That's the idea, okay? Because there was no one by the name of Evan Fields at that neighbor's residence. Holyfield, of course, denied it all. He said, nope, I never ordered any steroids. Package weren't for me. Don't ask me. It's not my name. My name is not Evan. My name is Evander Holyfield. Gate says they say Paul McKenna hypnotized Ben. He did hypnotize him. Nigel Benn spoke about it in the post-fight interview. He thanked Paul McKenna in the post-fight interview. And that was one of the legendary post-fight interviews, actually, where Nigel Benn was like, now people might start believing in the Dark Destroyer. Start believing that I'm number one, second to no one. And he turned to Don King and he's like, now you start believing in the Dark Destroyer. And Don King was like, you made a believer out of me, baby. You made a believer out of me. You know, Don King's voice. Yeah, Don King was scummy. He didn't give a damn about McClellan in the ring. It was clear that McClellan was in a terribly bad way. And Don King abandoned McClellan immediately and was trying to put his arm around Nigel Benn. That's Don King for you. Didn't give a flying about his fighter. Khalid says, how you so good with impressions? I thought my Don King impression was terrible, to be honest. I can't do a good Don King impression. If you thought he was good, shout out to you, but I think my Don King impression is awful. When I'm good at something, I'll acknowledge that too. I'm a good rapper. If anyone hasn't heard the track that I dropped, where I actually appear on video, on camera, check the link in the description. Yes, Hatman appears on camera, spitting fire bars. That's what they tell me. Check out the link in the description if you haven't seen it. Dan Burrows says Steve Collins also got hypnotized. Did he actually get hypnotized, or was that just like a mind game to get under Chris Eubank's skin? I forget now. I remember he said he got hypnotized, but I can't remember whether he actually said he went through with it or not. I forget. B-Tech Grimes says, you spoke about Wallin Chisora sit down yet? Chisora had him shook. Was going on like an evil villain. I haven't seen it, to be fair. I wasn't expecting much from it, but I'll definitely check it out now that you've mentioned it. Shout out to B-Tech Grime. Yeah, Mike Tyson described Don King. And this is not Mike Tyson back in the days. This is Mike Tyson in recent years. He described Don King as words to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing here, a cold-blooded reptilian motherfucker. He said that Don King just doesn't know how to love anybody. Now, Mike Tyson is quite a dangerous character himself, all right? Devious. Certainly when he was growing up, he was a devious criminal and robbed old ladies and knocked out old ladies for their groceries. Oh yeah, he did that when he was a kid growing up, like 12, 13 years old, maybe 11, 12 years old in Brownsville. He used to pretend like he was going to help old ladies, and then he'd take them to their apartment, then knock them out and take their money. So obviously he was a kid and he grew up traumatized in a very tough environment and all that kind of stuff, but he's a dangerous cat, Mike Tyson, you know? And he's turning around and telling you that Don King is like a cold-blooded reptilian who doesn't know how to love anybody. Hassan said Hatman rocking the M honcho look. Well, that video was from back in 2014, so I don't think M honcho was even around rapping back then, was he? Or he certainly wasn't wearing that mask. So maybe he's got the Hatman look. I'm just kidding. He don't know who I am. But still, yeah. That video's from like 2014. Yeah, Don King, in my opinion, is absolutely 100% a psychopath. 100%. He has all the typical traits that you get with psychopaths. All the traits, all the classic traits, he has them. He's got the typical background that you expect from a psychopath. He has the patter of a psychopath, the word salad. That's one common thing with a lot of psychopaths is word salad, where they just come out with a load of babble, blah, 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 blah. They're trying to bamboozle people with babble. That's one of the things that they do when they get cornered, is they come out with loads of psycho babble. Not all of them do it, but it's a common thing with psychopaths, is word salad. Don King does that. And if you ever watch him, there's a word that they use to describe psychopaths. A lot of these forensic psychologists, they describe them as glib. And glib is like, there's a falseness about them. So they come with a smile and all these happy, positive words. But if you look at their eyes, they've got the eyes of a predator. Or they have vacant looking eyes. You know, there's a disconnect between the look in their eyes and their smile. And Don King is exactly like that. You know, it's just so, his whole, you know, only in America, baby, and all that kind of stuff is just so fake. It's like a routine. And now at his old age, whatever he is in his 90s, all that's left now is just the psychobabble. Blah, 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 blah. Nobody knows what the hell this guy's saying at his press conferences. But he always has something to do with freedom, equality, and justice for all. Only in America, baby. You know, all this stuff that this routine he's rehearsed over the years. Okay, some people are saying the audio's going a bit strange. Is my audio still clear, or is it going a bit strange? American Dream babble. That's a very good way to describe it. Okay, some people saying it's going a bit fuzzy. Other people saying it's fine. Some people saying it's slight crackle. Oh, that could be. Hope it goes away. Difference. Other people saying it's fine. Okay. But yeah, Don King. Mike Oxlong says it's that crypto GPU farm you got running in the background. It might be the gods, the boxing gods, the streaming gods telling me to wrap the show up. How long have we been going for? Hour and a half. Workstation says, wonder who actually runs Don King's boxing promotion. He's definitely just a figurehead because he sounds so out of it. Or probably his son. His son was always involved in his business. So it's probably his son. Well, his son has very much followed in his dad's footsteps. Let's put it that way. If you go to Don King's Wikipedia page and you look into all the legal issues, you'll see that his son was implicated in many of the lawsuits and whatever. So the apple don't fall too far from the tree. Because oftentimes when these fighters would sue Don King, they would also sue the son. It's just that the son wasn't as visible, so people don't talk about him as much. But behind the scenes, all the business stuff, yeah, there was plenty of people who did not like the son. All right, peeps, I'm going to wrap this one up. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me on this stream. Special shout out to everybody who donated via Super Chat. It's always great to converse with you guys. And I do have to chuckle at poor Dtan Smith and Diego Pacheco because I tried to talk about their fight several times and nobody was interested. I was barely interested, to be honest with you. It's supposed to be a boxing stream, right? So we tried, but Pacheco's fight was so dull and Dtan Smith's fight was such a non-event. It's hard to even talk about them. Anyway, peace out. Catch you guys on the next one. Be good. See you on the other side.